The sun was setting over Phoenix Colony's spacecraft graveyard, casting long shadows through the hulking shapes of abandoned ships. Tom Reynolds walked slowly between the massive vessels, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. His old cargo ship, the Star Wanderer, stood before him like a silent giant from his past. 5 years had passed since he'd last seen her. "Still looks the same," he muttered, running his hand along the dusty hull. The ship's registration number, TC 847, was barely visible under years of dust and rust. Tom pulled out his access card, hoping the old security systems still recognized it. The airlock door creaked open with a hiss of stale air. Tom switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness inside. The corridor smelled musty, like old metal and forgotten memories. His footsteps echoed as he walked through his old home. "Just need to grab those photo chips from the cabin," he reminded himself. 10 minutes, tops. But something felt different. Tom had spent 8 years on this ship, and his instincts were telling him things weren't quite right. Small things caught his attention. A storage locker that should have been empty was closed tight. Some dust patterns on the floor looked like recent footprints, and the air didn't feel as stale as it should have after 5 years. As he approached the cargo hold, a soft sound made him freeze. It was like someone quickly moving behind the metal containers. Tom's heart began to beat faster. The graveyard was known for having thieves who stripped abandoned ships for parts. "Hello," he called out, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I'm the owner of this ship. If someone's here, you better show yourself." Silence answered him, but then he heard it. A small whimper, followed by what sounded like words in a language he'd never heard before. It didn't sound like any thief he'd dealt with. Tom moved closer to the source of the sound, his flashlight beam searching between the cargo containers. Something moved in the shadows, something that gave off a faint blue glow. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Come on out where I can see you." The glow grew brighter, and from behind a container emerged a sight that made Tom's jaw drop. It was a girl, but definitely not human. Her skin had a pale, almost translucent quality, with patterns of soft blue light flowing beneath it like gentle waves. Her large eyes reflected his flashlight beam, and she held what looked like a small device in her trembling hands. The device made a series of clicking sounds, and then words came out in slightly robotic English. "Please, no hurt, no tell others." Tom lowered his flashlight, realizing it was probably bothering her eyes. The girl's own bioluminescence provided enough light to see her clearly now. She wore what looked like a flight suit of some kind, but it was dirty and torn in places. "I won't hurt you," Tom said slowly, making sure to speak clearly. "How long have you been here?" The translator device clicked again. 3 months by Earth time. Ship was empty. Needed safe place. Tom's mind raced. He'd heard rumors about alien refugees hiding in human space, but he'd always thought they were just stories. Yet here was one, living in his old ship, looking at him with eyes that showed both fear and hope. Before he could ask another question, a loud mechanical hum filled the air outside. The girl's bioluminescent patterns flashed in what seemed like panic. "Security drones," she said through her translator. "Weekly scan. Please. They must not find me." Tom looked toward the cargo hold entrance, then back at the alien girl. He had about 30 seconds to make a decision that would change his life forever. The humming of the drones grew louder, and in that moment, Tom Reynolds realized his simple salvage trip had just become something much more complicated. Tom made his decision quickly. "Behind the power core housing," he whispered, pointing to a hidden space he used to store emergency supplies. "The drone's sensors can't scan through the shielding." The alien girl moved silently, her blue patterns dimming until they were barely visible. Tom watched her slip into the hiding spot, just as the drone's scanning beams pierced through the cargo hold's windows. He pulled out his old maintenance tablet and pretended to check system readings. The drones would see a former ship owner doing routine checks. Nothing unusual about that. After 5 tense minutes, the humming faded away. Tom waited another minute to be sure, then called out softly, "They're gone. You can come out now." She emerged cautiously, her luminescent patterns brightening again. Now that the immediate danger had passed, Tom could see her more clearly. She looked almost human except for her glowing patterns and slightly larger eyes. Her translator device hung from a cord around her neck. "Thank you." The device spoke as she pressed buttons on it. "Most humans would have reported me." "Well, I'm not most humans," Tom said, sitting down on a nearby crate. "I'm Tom Reynolds. Do you have a name I can pronounce?" She made a series of musical sounds that Tom knew he'd never be able to repeat. The translator spoke. "In your language, closest meaning is morning light. But I choose Earth name Rose. Easier for humans." "Rose?" Tom nodded. "All right, Rose. Want to tell me why you're hiding in my old ship?" Rose's patterns shifted to darker blues as she spoke. "I am Luminary. We are peaceful race. But another species, the Dark Swarm, they hunt us now. Destroy our worlds. Take our people." Her translator crackled with static as she continued. "I escaped during transport. Found this place. Ship had power, air systems still worked. Was safe here." Tom remembered news reports about strange signals from deep space and rumors of new alien species making contact with frontier colonies. But nothing official had ever been announced. "The Dark Swarm," he said slowly. "Are they following you?" Rose's patterns pulsed with what Tom guessed was fear. "They follow all Luminary. Have spies everywhere, even in human space, if they find me." Her translator fell silent, but her expression said enough. "How have you survived here for 3 months?" Tom asked, looking around the cargo hold. He noticed subtle changes now. Hidden caches of supplies, a small sleeping area carefully concealed behind cargo containers. "Learn human systems quickly. Good at fixing things," Rose explained. "Ship still had emergency rations. Found way to filter water from colony's waste pipes. But food running low now." Tom ran his hand through his hair, thinking hard. Harboring an undocumented alien was a serious crime. He could lose his pilot's license, face heavy fines, maybe even prison time. But looking at Rose, seeing the fear and hope in her eyes, he couldn't just walk away. "Listen," he said finally, "I know some people from my cargo running days. People who help others disappear when they need to. Maybe we can." A loud alarm from Rose's translator cut him off. Her patterns flashed bright with panic as she checked the device's screen. "Dark Swarm signal," she gasped. "Their scout ship just entered orbit. They're scanning the colony." Tom looked up at the cargo hold ceiling, knowing somewhere up there, humanity's first real contact with an alien threat was about to begin. And he was right in the middle of it. "Right," he said, standing up. "Looks like we need to move fast. Rose, how good are you at repairing old jump drives?" Rose's patterns shifted to a brighter blue as she examined the old jump drive. "Can fix," her translator spoke, "but need parts. Power cells dead." Tom checked his tablet's connection to the colony's network. "Dark Swarm ship is still high in orbit. We got maybe 2 hours before they start ground scans." He pulled up a map of the spacecraft graveyard. "There's a parts dealer half a mile from here. Guy named Mike owes me a favor." "Too dangerous," Rose said. "Dark Swarm have technology to detect luminary energy patterns. Cannot go outside." Tom looked around the cargo hold, his mind racing. Then he remembered something. "Wait here," he said, hurrying to his old cabin. After a few minutes of searching, he returned with a dusty metal box. "Stealth netting," he explained, opening the box. "Used it to hide cargo from customs scanners back in my less legal days. Should block your energy signature too." Rose touched the metallic fabric carefully. Her patterns dimmed as she wrapped it around herself like a cloak. Tom checked his tablet's basic scanner. Nothing. She was invisible to it. "Good thinking," she said. "But colony security. Checkpoints. Leave that to me." Tom pulled out his old cargo pilot ID. Still have clearance to move salvage. You'll be my assistant. Just keep the netting on and let me do the talking. They made their way through the graveyard, Rose walking close behind Tom. The setting sun cast long shadows that helped hide them between the ships. As they approached the colony's salvage sector, they heard voices ahead. "Security checkpoint," Tom whispered. "Remember, let me handle this." Two guards stood at the checkpoint, looking bored. One of them straightened up when he saw Tom approaching. "ID and purpose," he called out. "Tom Reynolds," he said, holding up his card. "Salvage work on TC 847. My assistant here is helping with the heavy lifting." He gestured to Rose, who kept her head down, the stealth netting covering most of her form. The guard checked his tablet. "Reynolds, yeah, you're in the system. That your old ship, right?" "Trying to get her flying again," Tom said casually. "Parts aren't cheap these days." "Tell me about it," the guard laughed. "All right, go ahead. Just stay clear of Section D. Some kind of military exercise going on there." Tom's heart skipped a beat. Military exercise, or Dark Swarm scouts. He nodded thanks and walked past, Rose following silently. They reached Mike's shop just as the first stars became visible. The old parts dealer was closing up, but his face lit up when he saw Tom. "Reynolds, you old space dog," Mike called out. Then he noticed Rose and lowered his voice. "Who's your friend?" "Someone who needs help," Tom said quietly. "Like I did during the Mars crisis." Mike's smile faded. He looked at Rose more carefully, then at the darkening sky. "Inside," he said quickly. "Both of you." Once they were in his cluttered shop, Mike locked the door and turned off the main lights. "They're not just in orbit," he said grimly. "Saw two of them an hour ago. Looked human, but moved wrong. Asked questions about unusual energy readings." Rose's patterns flashed with fear beneath the netting. Her translator crackled. "Dark Swarm infiltrators. Already here." "How long to get the parts we need?" Tom asked Mike. 10 minutes, but Mike hesitated. "You'll never make it back to your ship. They're setting up scan points all over the graveyard." Tom looked at Rose, then back at Mike. "Then we need a new plan. And I think I know what the Dark Swarm is really looking for." Mike pulled a crate from beneath his workbench. "If they're looking for what I think they're looking for, you'll need these." He opened it to reveal several old military-grade shield generators. "Those are illegal," Tom said, surprised. "Where did you—" "Mars crisis leftovers," Mike cut him off. "Now listen. 3 Dark Swarm scouts came through here. They weren't just asking about energy readings. They were looking for data crystals." Rose's patterns suddenly pulsed with bright colors. She reached into her suit and pulled out a small crystal that glowed with swirling colors, similar to her own patterns. "You're not just a refugee, are you?" Tom asked quietly. Rose's translator clicked. "Am scientist. Was working on weapon against Dark Swarm. They found our lab. Had to run. Data crystal contains their weakness." Tom stared at the crystal. In the dim light of Mike's shop, it looked both beautiful and dangerous. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Needed to know if could trust," Rose replied. "Many humans work with Dark Swarm. Did not know you then." A loud explosion somewhere in the distance made them all jump. Emergency sirens began wailing across the colony. "They're starting their search," Mike said, moving to his security screens. "They're not even trying to be subtle now." The screens showed chaos in the streets as people ran from dark, shadowy figures that moved too fast to be human. Tom grabbed the shield generators. "We need to get back to the ship." "The jump drive." "Won't help," Rose interrupted. "Ship's power core dead too long." "But—" She touched the crystal. "Crystal contains enough energy. Can power jump drive. But what? We'll burn out after one jump and need time to connect properly." More explosions rocked the building. Mike's security screens showed the Dark Swarm forces moving methodically through the colony, sector by sector. They're heading this way, Mike warned. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast. Tom looked at the shield generators, then at Rose. Can you connect that crystal while we move? Rose's patterns flickered thoughtfully. Yes, if have tools, if have protection. I'll get you both back to the ship, Mike said, moving to a wall panel. He pressed a hidden switch, revealing a narrow tunnel. Maintenance shaft. Runs under the graveyard. Used it to move supplies during the crisis. Tom quickly helped Rose gather the tools she needed while Mike loaded supplies into a bag. The sounds of destruction were getting closer. They'll detect us as soon as we power up the ship, Tom realized. Rose's translator crackled. No choice. Crystal will draw them anyway. Better in space than here. The building shook as something heavy landed on the roof. Dust fell from the ceiling, and they heard the sound of metal being torn. Go, Mike shouted, pushing them toward the tunnel. I'll hold them off. Mike. Tom started. Just like Mars, kid, Mike grinned, pulling out an old pulse rifle. Sometimes you gotta make a stand. Now move. Tom and Rose hurried into the tunnel as Mike sealed it behind them. The sound of weapon fire echoed faintly through the walls. This way, Tom said, switching on his flashlight. The tunnel should come up near the ship's landing gear. As they ran through the dark passage, Rose's patterns provided an eerie blue light. She worked with the crystal as they moved, her fingers moving with incredible speed over its surface. Tom, she said suddenly, her translator's voice serious, must tell you something. About crystal. About what it really does. The tunnel's darkness pressed around them as they hurried forward, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Rose's glowing patterns cast moving shadows as she spoke. Crystal, not just weapon, her translator buzzed, is key to network. All luminary connected through light patterns. Crystal can link all human systems too. Tom ducked under a low pipe. What do you mean, link systems? Dark swarm strong because ships think alone. Luminary strong because we think together. Rose's patterns pulsed faster. Crystal can make human ships think together too. Like one big mind. The implications hit Tom like a physical force. You're talking about connecting every human ship and defense system into a single network. That's impossible. Not impossible. Dangerous. Rose clutched the crystal tighter. If connection fails, all systems fail. If succeeds, humanity joins luminary network. Together can fight dark swarm. A distant explosion shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. They were getting close to the ship now. Tom recognized the layout of the pipes above them. How many other luminary are hiding in human space? He asked. Many. Hundreds. All waiting. All with pieces of plan. Rose's translator crackled. I have main key. Others have codes, protocols. Need all to work. They reached the tunnel's exit point. Tom could see his ship's landing gear through the grating above, but he could also see dark shapes moving between the ships in the graveyard. Dark swarm know what crystal does, Rose continued. Why they hunt so hard. If they get crystal, can use network against us. Against humans too. Tom checked the shield generators Mike had given them. These won't hold them off for long. How much time do you need to connect the crystal to the ship? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Rose's patterns dimmed. But Tom, connecting crystal will send signal. All dark swarm in system will know. Then we'll have to be ready. Tom pulled out the first shield generator. I'll set up a perimeter. Once we're up there, seal yourself in the engine room. Don't open for anything but my voice. Understand? Rose touched his arm, her patterns forming complex swirls. Tom, linking crystal to human ship never done before. Might. Her translator hesitated. Might change ship. Change pilot too. Change how? Connection goes both ways. Ship will think like luminary. Pilot might start to see like luminary. Think like luminary. She looked at him intently. Permanent. Another explosion, closer this time. The dark shapes were moving towards them. Well, Tom managed a smile. I always wanted to see the universe differently. He reached for the grating. Ready? Rose's patterns brightened. Ready. They pushed open the grating and climbed out. The ship was 30 feet away, its hull reflecting the chaos of explosions in the distance. Tom set up the shield generators in a circle, creating a shimming barrier of energy. "Go," he shouted. Rose sprinted for the ship while Tom activated the last generator. The shield hummed to life just as the first dark swarm creature slammed into it. Tom got his first clear look at their hunters. The creature was humanoid but wrong. Its body seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where its face should have been, there was only a dark void. More of them appeared, testing the shield's strength. Tom backed toward his ship as Rose worked to open the airlock. The shield generators were already starting to smoke from the strain. "Tom," Rose called. "Inside now. Must start connection." As Tom ran for the airlock, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. The shields failing, one by one. The race against time had begun. Tom slammed the airlock shut just as the last shield generator failed. The dark swarm creatures swarmed over the ship's hull, their touches leaving frost-like patterns on the metal. "Engine room," Rose called, her patterns pulsing rapidly as she ran through the corridors. "Must connect crystal before they break in." They reached the engine room, and Tom sealed the heavy doors behind them. Rose immediately went to work, her glowing hands moving with incredible speed as she connected the crystal to the ship's systems. "How long?" Tom asked, watching the security feed on his tablet. The dark swarm were trying to breach the airlock. 5 minutes, Rose's translator crackled. "Maybe less." "But Tom," she turned to him, her patterns forming complex shapes he was starting to understand. "Must warn. When crystal connects, change begins. Will be painful." Tom nodded, checking the ship's old weapon systems. Most were dead, but the point defense turrets still had some charge. He activated them, buying them precious seconds as the dark swarm scattered from the laser fire. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered. Rose's patterns brightened intensely as she worked with the crystal. Around them, the engine room systems started coming alive, glowing with the same ethereal light as Rose's patterns. "Tom," she called urgently, "need your help. Must initialize connection through human interface." He ran to the control panel where Rose had attached the crystal. Its light was spreading through the ship's circuits like glowing veins. "Put hands here," she instructed, indicating 2 glowing panels. "Will hurt, but must not let go, no matter what." Tom placed his hands on the panels. At first, nothing happened. Then pain shot through his arms like liquid fire. He gritted his teeth, fighting to keep his hands in place. Through the pain, he began to see differently. The ship's systems appeared in his mind like streams of light. He could feel every circuit, every power conduit. More than that, he could feel Rose's presence, her thoughts intertwining with the ship's systems, and with his own mind. "Others coming," Rose said, but now Tom heard her both through the translator and directly in his thoughts. "Luminary across colony awakening. Network forming." The security feed showed more flashes of light in the spacecraft graveyard. Other ships were powering up, their systems glowing with the same ethereal energy. From them emerged more luminary, their patterns blazing like beacons in the darkness. The dark swarm creatures recoiled from the light, but they didn't retreat. Instead, they began to merge together, forming a massive shadowy mass that rose up over the ships. "Almost ready," Rose communicated, "but need more power. Tom, must give permission. Let ship become part of you. Let you become part of network." The pain was intense now, spreading from his arms throughout his body. Through it, Tom could feel the ship changing, its old systems transforming into something new, something alive. "We'll never be same," Rose warned. "We'll see universe as we see, feel what we feel. Forever part of light." The dark swarm mass was pressing against the ship now, its darkness trying to overwhelm the growing light. In his mind, Tom could feel other humans across the colony making the same choice, joining their ships with the Luminary network. Tom looked at his hands, now glowing with patterns similar to Rose's. The pain was nearly unbearable, but through it, he could feel something extraordinary taking shape. A network of minds, both human and luminary, joining together against the darkness. "Do it," he gasped through clenched teeth. "Connect everything." Rose's patterns flared like a supernova as she made the final connection. The crystal pulsed once, twice, and then the universe changed. Light exploded through the ship's systems. Tom's vision shifted, and suddenly he could see everything, not just with his eyes, but through the combined awareness of hundreds of connected minds. Every ship in the graveyard glowed with luminary energy, their systems pulsing in perfect synchronization. Through the network, he felt other humans like himself, their consciousness expanding as they joined with their ships and luminary partners. Each connection strengthened the whole, creating a web of light that pushed back against the dark swarm's shadow. Network complete. Rose's thoughts rang through his mind, clearer than any translator. "Tom, you must guide the others. Humans trust human leader." Tom could feel the ship's controls responding to his thoughts now. No need for physical interfaces. The ship had become an extension of himself. Through the network, he sent out a clear command. "All ships, rise." Dozens of vessels lifted off simultaneously, their engines glowing with crystalline light. The massive shadow creature that the dark swarm had formed tried to engulf them, but the combined light from the ships created a barrier it couldn't penetrate. Pattern attack formation. Tom projected through the network. Years of cargo flying had taught him how ships should move together. Now, with every pilot connected, they could execute perfect formations that would have been impossible before. The ships moved as one, creating geometric patterns of light that sliced through the dark swarm's darkness. Each pattern weakened the creature, forcing it to break apart into smaller entities that were easier to target. "The crystal's energy is fading," Rose warned. They could all feel it. The power source that had started this transformation was burning out quickly. But through the network, Tom sensed something else. "It doesn't matter," he realized. "The crystal was just a key. The power is coming from us now. All of us, human and luminary together." The dark swarm creatures sensed it too. Their shadowy forms began to retreat, trying to escape the growing web of light. But the connected ships moved to surround them, closing off their escape routes. Through the network, Tom could feel Mike's presence. He had survived and joined with another luminary. Together, they coordinated the final attack pattern. The ships arranged themselves in a perfect sphere, each vessel contributing its energy to a single, massive pulse of light. Now, Tom and Rose commanded together. The pulse expanded outward, engulfing everything in brilliant radiance. The dark swarm shadows scattered like smoke in a strong wind, their darkness unable to exist in the face of such unified light. As the pulse faded, Tom looked out through both his eyes and the ship's sensors. The spacecraft graveyard had transformed. Every ship connected to the network now bore glowing patterns like luminary script, permanently changed by the merging of technologies. "More dark swarm will come," Rose said, her patterns now perfectly synchronized with the ship's pulsing lights. "But now we are ready." Together. Tom nodded, feeling the agreement of hundreds of others through the network. Humanity had just taken its first step into a larger universe, one where the barriers between species and machines had been forever changed. Through the network, he could sense ships lifting off from other colonies, other luminary revealing themselves and connecting with human partners. What had started in a forgotten corner of a spacecraft graveyard was spreading across human space. "What now?" he asked Rose, though he could already sense her answer through their shared connection. "Now," she replied, her patterns matching his newly formed ones. "We light the way for others. Show them path through darkness." She gestured at the star-filled sky above them. Many worlds waiting. Many people to help. The ship, their ship now, hummed with energy as they prepared to leave the colony. Tom looked at his glowing hands, then at the patterns of light spreading through the colony below. In just one day, everything had changed. And somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, he knew more changes were coming. Well, he smiled, feeling Rose's agreement through their connection. Let's go show them what light can do.